Welcome to the Story Tinker Podcast, a place for in-depth analysis of webtoon stories. Co-hosted by sharp, witty, and dare I say thirsty fans, we dive deep into every episode, analyzing character struggles, relationship development, and of course, theories. You can follow the Story Tinker on YouTube, podcast platforms, and social media. For bonus content, sneak peeks, and more, you can support the Story Tinker on Patreon. We are really appreciative of your likes, subscribes, and follows on all platforms. Thank you for listening to the Story Tinker, and let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of the Purple Hyacinth on the Story Tinker. And we have Fwoot and Vita with us today.
Hello.
Hello.
So we start out with Kieran in his apartment, and this is right, like time-wise, this is happening after he had the argument with Lauren. He goes to the precinct. He's like, "Oh, hello, I'm the new archivist." Fights with Lauren. They talk in the alleyway and comes home. So he opens the door, the locked door, the elusive, mysterious locked door that we were so curious about. Pushes it open, creaks. He has a very serious look on his face, and then we have Purple Hyacinth to add to the suspense. and he walks through. We see he's walking past a whole bunch of boxes. And what are those boxes filled with? We still don't know, actually. So I think we can speculate. You want to speculate now or in a bit? At the end of the
I don't know. I don't think I've ever really talked about the boxes to people. I just assumed it was like storage for papers.
A lot of storage.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a small apartment. I don't know. He's probably hiding like Purple Hyacinths in there. Because I remember like in between season 1 and season 2, people would theorize like what he had in that room. And there was a lot about like maybe he just grows his hyacinths in there. Yeah, he has a little garden. So
like the secret garden. Yeah. Oh my god, I just realized all this time in episode 38 when it says the secret garden, I was like, oh, it's the friends, it's for childhood friends, girl, 2 boys. And I'm like, oh my god, the secret garden. He has a secret garden of hyacinth. Why did I not think of that?
Mindy, did you just blow your own mind?
Yes, I can't believe it. It's so obvious. He has a secret garden. Anyway.
Yeah, I was just thinking the boxes were filled with paper, whether it's like, I don't know, old receipts or just drawings. I think later on when you I remember there was a top-down view of his office too, and you see some papers on top of the boxes. I just assumed that they were filled with them.
Same. I just like, for the most part, I just thought it was paper. I don't know how he made that many drawings, but like,
what if some of them are drawings, but some of them are Phantom Scythe documents that he's been squirreling away to implicate the leader?
It seems like a liability having them in his house though, because I mean, as we know, like later on in the season, right? Yeah, they know where he lives, and he has that cave, right?
Yeah.
So why not just leave it in the cave? But then you kind of got to ask, like, does the PS know about his cave too? Like, you'd assume not. That they don't, right? Because he feels safe enough to have loon documents there and work as loon there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But and like, did they say have Lauren there or just loon stuff? I can't remember. My memory is out the window. But yeah, like, I feel like the Phantom Scythe would be more on top of this, right? Like, I feel like right now, I feel like the Phantom Scythe knows about Lauren and Kieran being loon. So, like, even if Kieran doesn't realize it, I don't know, just keeping like the Phantom Scythe documents in your house.
Yeah, probably not.
Just doesn't seem like the smartest to me.
Yeah, I do feel like I do wonder if it's significant. Like, yeah, part of me wonders if it's just clutter, but I don't know. I feel like there must be something important. It's a lot of boxes. I don't know. Maybe he's extremely prolific. So anyway, he heads over, he pulls out a chair, and he sits at a desk. And the lighting is just stunning, gorgeous, as always. Purple Hyacinth has the best lighting. He's sitting there bathed in moonlight, and he says, what a mess. So, Kieran can pretend in front of other people that he doesn't care, but he does care. And I think when he says what a mess, it's not just like oh my gosh, now I have to kill myself, basically. But you know, the mission. But I think also emotionally, he's like, what a mess this whole relationship is falling apart.
I mean, this episode for Kieran at least is riding off of episode 50 and episode 52, and Lauren is very mad in those episodes. And because I was coming into this episode from 52, I was like, okay, Kieran, what do you got? Because like I was so pissed at Kieran in 52. Like 52 is one of my least favorite Kieran episodes, just from like, it's like this one panel of him being snarky, and after that I was like, you're done, you're done. But I was like, this is your chance for redemption, okay? Like, because he's like, what a mess. But I'm also like in the back, I'm like here, like, Kieran, you were being snarky to her earlier. Do not act like this is all out of your control.
Yeah, he shoots himself in the foot. Like he, you know, he just makes it worse for himself because he just can't stop his behavior. He doesn't know how to be normal and act like, you know, genuine. So he just has to keep piling it on and making his behavior more and more obnoxious because he just doesn't know how to relate in another way. I mean, he does get better over the course of the season, but yeah, he definitely does not have adequate communication skills.
I feel like too, this episode was more like that. Kieran hasn't changed as a character between what happened in episode 50 to 54. The only thing that's really changed is like how much guilt he feels. I thought this episode was just so pivotal to give the readers the context of where Kieran is coming from. Because like you guys mentioned, up until this episode, it's like, what the hell are you doing, Kieran? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're effing up really bad right now. And then we finally see this little window into his soul where it's not just a black hole. There is humanity left in him. And I think for him, it's like he doesn't know how to deal with some of these very intense emotions. And I think that's coming, like, and he knows he messed up with Lauren, which is why he's saying, oh my goodness, how am I going to clean this up? Like, what a mess this is.
Yeah.
I think for like, oh, sorry. Wendy, were you trying to say something? Okay. Sorry, I had a thought and I'm like blanking on it. For Kieran, right, he uses his obnoxiousness as a way to sort of deflect what's going on in a situation. And we really see this in episode 50 and 52, where he's more trying to brush off what happened, right, in, you know, the 40s arc in that episode. And, you know, there is quite a bit of disconnect because Kieran in those two episodes, 50 and 52, is seemingly trying to move past it because, you know, new matters have arisen for him, that being his mission to now kill Loon, and he has to shift his focus to other things. But Lauren, rightfully, like, Lauren's still stuck, you know, in the 40s arc, rightfully so. It's valid, it's justified, you know, pretty traumatizing what happened there. And so for her, emotionally, she has not been able to get past it, and it makes a lot of sense because, like, I mean, this is like the next day maybe from the 40s arc.
You're right. Yeah, that's insane.
That's insane. Like,
yeah,
you know, so it's a mess for Lauren, right? Because she's like, I can't think of the word, but like, she's standing where she is. She's not moving, right? But Kieran, again, trying to move ahead. He's trying to get stuff done. He's still trying to you know, accomplish whatever he's trying to accomplish, right? And Lauren this morning has just called off Loon, which he also created, right? Like, he was the one who came to her and was like, hey, we should be like this vigilante group, right? And so I also think the what a mess is not just between his personal relationship with Lauren, but also now that Loon has been officially disbanded, he has to figure out what to do from here on out.
Right. And, while you were talking, it made me think that maybe the reason Kieran is much more able to be focused on practical matters is because he has a lot more experience dealing with extremely traumatizing events happening to him. We know, I don't remember if we've seen it yet, but we don't know from at some point a flashback that he's been tortured. So, he's been physically abused already, and like he's had to move on from these kinds of events probably very, very often. So for him, he can compartmentalize, okay, this happened. And yeah, it does bother him. Like we see later, like he regrets what he did, but he's able to say, okay, I'm not thinking about it now, right? He's had to compartmentalize, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, for all of his life, where in order to be a normal person, he has to just shove it away and be like, I'm not thinking about it now. Well, Laura doesn't have that experience, thankfully, where she hasn't been beaten up and abused like all the time.
I think for Lauren, it's like she's able to handle herself in very stressful situations that she can predict might occur. So like we see this in the upcoming factory arc, right? We see this in most of the Loon missions, right? She has relatively good composure before and after it, but when something very sudden happens that she could not see coming, whether it be like Dylan dying in the Allendale explosion, whether it be the tower murders, right? And then Kieran doing the whole monster thing, and the photograph in Onslow's notebook, those things are what really get her, right? And so
It's like when it affects her personally. I was just thinking like the common thread through all that as we were listing them. It's like the things that hit close to home for her.
Well, no, for this, I think it's because Lauren lives in a reality, right, that she's very comfortable with. She still feels emotion, right? She's still, very traumatized, of course, but her reality in the world that she herself lives in is very set and very solid in her mind. Like she has certain ideas about certain groups. She has ideas about herself, that haven't budged really. And so when things come and upset these realities, right? So Dylan's death, the knowledge that her parents' death wasn't an accident, that they were murdered, her relationship with Kieran, because what that episode really does is it upsets her relationship with Kieran in a way that almost no one could see coming. That episode's just very shocking, and it does feel like a natural progression of where they were going, but it's still like insane to see how their relationship flipped. So for Lauren, her reality, when it flips, she reacts very emotionally, right? However, with Kieran, he's used to his reality getting shifted and turned all the time.
So now we transition to Lauren's house, and Lauren is showering, and I feel like every single Webtoons comics has a scene of people showering in their like back, because it's like acceptable. Anywho, yeah. So showering, and she clearly looks very, very exhausted and worn, and she's using the shower to like cleanse and just like unwind. And she thinks the same thing because they're very similar. What a mess I got myself in. But I can't think of his mission right now, right? So it's the opposite, right? She has to not think about it. And she's concerned with her own personal history and Chim's sake, right? Where he lied and said the car was borrowed from a random rich family. And she said the car wasn't borrowed. It was used without permission to pick up Sig before the explosion. My parents weren't random in the eyes of the Phantom Scythe. Their death was planned. And Tivsake says they were going to die anyway. We figured they wouldn't miss it, which is true, right? So he realizes that someone plotted to kill them. Why? Because they were wealthy. But their driver, and we have a picture of their driver and her mom. And the driver has his ring finger is cut off at the second knuckle, first knuckle, I don't know, something. And she's just very, very distraught. She leans over, grips the wall. She's very, very upset. How long had he been a part of the Phantom Scythe? Turns off the shower, gets out, and Vita, you want to take over? Yeah. So anyway, that's what she's ruminating about, the new information that she just got from her encounter with Himsig, because her world, she has a lot of unsolved mysteries and that are really weighing heavily on her mind.
I thought it was really clever too that you have like this mess kind of imagery in your head, and then you see her taking a shower, just kind of like coming clean almost. I'm sure that was intentional, having both the characters say mess and then having her take a shower, just like the symbolism of coming clean, or in this case, kind of her trying to piece together and clear her head was also literally her cleaning the outside of her body, just like a parallel.
I doubt this was intentional, but like every time I reread that scene, Lauren always looks like porcelain to me, like because the way that the lighting is done, she looks very pale, right? And because there's like water streaming down and her hair around her face, like strands of hair, to me she always looks like, you know, she's porcelain with cracks in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was really intentional, but it's just something that, you know, I noticed a lot, and it gives her a very fragile look.
That's a good point. Yep. Vita, do you want to continue with the Kieran part?
So now we have Kieran sitting at his desk again, and we finally get to see some of the resolution to the purpose of the room. As we then kind of see him rubbing his eyes and then finally glancing down at what's essentially a scrap or sketch paper, and all these pencils at different stages of their lives, and the fact that he's actually using these pencils to draw. And he's kind of, it feels very meditative, kind of like Lauren in the shower, where he's just kind of composing himself, making the atmosphere for him comfortable for him to finally start to draw.
That's a good point. It does that, you know, that is meditative for him. Like this is the one thing that he has to calm him down. Also, his eyes are so gorgeous. They all have like beautiful long eyelashes.
And then we get to the shower dripping back to Lauren.
Yeah, I guess I'll do that. So yeah, she's in pajamas and she decides, you know, all these questions have piqued her curiosity, and she decides she's going to explore. She goes to the attic, she pulls down the ladder and goes up, and there's a ton of boxes there. So also Kieran has boxes and she has boxes. A lot of similarities. Yeah. And she starts opening them up. And then there's one box that makes her, you know, look shocked. This is Rachel and Alexander Sinclair office. And then we go back to Kieran.
Yeah, and then we switch back to Kieran, and we kind of see him start to draw, and then we start to get a flashback. And it's really interesting because not only do they change like the clothes he's wearing, they also change the time of day. So it makes it very clear that this is a different point in time. And we see him talking to someone. And someone's asking him, why are you always drawing? And we hear, and Kieran says back, wow, have you ever felt that tinge of warmth when you see those subtle moments in life that remind you humanity can be beautiful? I draw them, I draw them so I can keep it. This sense of humanity, I don't ever want to lose it.
I believe that self-confirmed that Kieran is 16 in this episode, or in this flashback. And something I forgot to mention that I wanted to mention earlier is that when Lauren goes into the attic and we see that big panel of the attic, there's a wedding dress in there.
What? Oh my gosh. I just flipped through that.
And I always thought it was like Rachel's wedding dress, And I was like, oh, that's so sad. But I think in a later episode, I think episode 86, we see a picture of Rachel at her and Alexander's wedding, and she's not wearing that dress. So now I'm like, whose dress is it?
Wait, I wonder if it's like a plot thing or if it's just a mistake and they like redesigned the dress by mistake.
I would guess it to be like a continuity error, but I just think it's like, so it could be Rachel's dress. It's most likely Rachel's dress because I would assume that this attic is where Lauren and Tristan put a lot of Rachel and Alexander's things if they didn't sell them, because we have like the Rachel and Alexander files in there.
I guess the way I took that, just seeing the statue, my grandmother used to be a seamstress when she was younger. And she would have like all of these figures like scattered around the basement, and they would all be draped with fabric. So when I saw this, it was more like, oh, Lauren's mom was probably a seamstress. That was my thought, at least. And then maybe this was like a final project, and Lauren just wanted to have that like memory of her mom sewing or something. The time setting would fit as well. I do like thinking that it's a wedding dress too. I think it's honestly up for anyone's flavor of interpretation.
Vita, I don't know if you know this, but I believe it said somewhere that Alexander and Rachel met in law school.
Yeah.
Implying that they were
Later.
both lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, she could have sewn as a hobby, maybe.
She could still be a seamstress.
I don't know how much, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know how much time lawyers have.
She was very dedicated to her craft.
Yeah. But I don't know why they would still have it 10 years later. That's my thing.
Wow. So the Kieran revelation. I mean, this is amazing because we've always been thinking, he has no heart. The veneer at least he presents is heartlessness, doesn't flippancy, someone who doesn't care. And here we see him at a young age where he's revealing to whoever he's talking to, which let's guess in a second. And he's being completely forthright and honest. And without a shred of sarcasm, he's just really bearing his soul. So, and he must trust this person and just telling them, a really, really personal thing about himself. And he has this beautiful smile on his face. And we can guess from stuff that happened later that he's already been kidnapped at this point, and that the fact that he's still able to say, what he's saying with a smile on his face, right? It's just shows you his character, and the fact that he said he doesn't want to lose it. So I think it's pretty clear from flashbacks that we have later on that he was kidnapped when he was younger than 16. So he knows what could happen to him being part of the Phantom Scythe, and he doesn't want to be like them. He still wants to, even if he's forced to do terrible things, he wants to keep that. And the fact that now, as present Kieran, we see that he draws, that means that he still has that to him. He still wants to keep that humanity.
The thing that gets me with this episode is that the timeline with Kieran, even in this season, is kind of non-existent. There's no solid timeline for which we can construct that would kind of, align canonically. And I guess it makes sense because it's like, like he's the purple hyacinth, he's part of the mystery, he's going to be revealed more later on. But that's one thing that I really like about Bella in this season is that we can, make rough estimates for when things happened based off like context clues and just information given to us from like what we know about the circus. And so it feels like there was a timeline that happened with Bella, right? And we can understand her journey with the Phantom Scythe, which although vague, it just, adds a little bit to her. But with Kieran, a lot of his flashback scenes in this season lack a lot of context, right? We don't really know what's happening. A lot of the times we don't know how old he is. And because Soph's art style does change throughout the season, using how he looks like for some of the flashbacks is not a great tool for understanding how old he is, because he's 16 in this flashback. He was 17 when the purple hyacinth came to be. So there's about a year gap between this scene and the purple hyacinth. And then you have to ask, how much training did he require to become the purple hyacinth, right? And you would guess that it was over a year, right? So is he in the Phantom Scythe at this point? But there's the thing with that is that there's just, you can't even tell with this episode. It's just so vague, and that's something that I personally don't like. It makes sense, but you know, throughout, like for this season or for this flashback here, it works. But I wish, like, you know, by the end of the season, we could have had more of an idea of, you know, where he was by this point, especially since we had quite a few flashbacks since.
Right. So everything you say, like the reason that I think that maybe he isn't a purple hyacinth at this point, sorry, the Phantom Scythe. Well, we have the flashback of him with Chandelier Man, right? So that was presumably his first, like, beginning as purple hyacinth. And then we have a scene with him being tortured as a young person. We don't know exactly when that is, though. But then the other thing, the reason that I think maybe he is because there's the scene of the child saying, run. We don't know if it's Kieran for sure. We're all assuming. So, and we were assuming that somehow that's connected to him being kidnapped at the front, but we really don't know. So you're right. Like, seeing him here, who knows? I don't know. We don't know. We're just guessing.
Kieran,
I feel like
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna play devil's advocate a little, because like if you do say that the trauma happened before this flashback scene, you could also make the argument that Kieran is just trying to preserve that innocence inside himself too. Like, I'm going to find beauty in humanity despite, you know, my past trauma. But you could read it that way. Again, like you were mentioning, just how happy he looks. Like, is it happiness or is it maybe melancholy? It's hard to pinpoint exactly what that emotion is, but definitely up for interpretation, like in terms of timeline.
My guess right now for the timeline is the youngest scene of Kieran, the youngest flashback scene from 73, I think. That scene is not related to the Phantom Scythe at all, because he looks around 8 to 12 in that scene, and the Phantom Scythe really just, yeah, it was even him. The Phantom Scythe just wouldn't have been a big thing by then, and it still would have been a Snapdragon era. So maybe he was in the circus, which leads into the circus Kieran theory, because circus would have come around when he was 9, and he does look around that age, so maybe he's getting taken to the circus there. But it's something, and we know that he did likely come from a lower income area, and maybe even Grey Chapel, if not one of the surrounding districts. And so it could just be even like the police abusing him, because we know that the police are not great to children in those areas, and it was even worse during Edward's reign, which is likely when that flashback took place. And then, you know, we see him getting beaten up, right? We see him trying to run from something, and what confuses me there is that he looks around this age, right? Maybe a little bit younger, maybe a bit older. It's hard to tell, again, because of how the art style changes. And so, you know, it's like, would Kieran be acting like this? Like, he acts very innocent and pure. Would he be acting like this after what he had gone through?
Yeah.
Because he seems pure, yes, in this flashback, but he doesn't really seem traumatized either, you know. Like, especially in the panel where it's like, where he's smiling and he says, have you ever felt that tinge of warmth when you see those subtle moments in life that remind you that humanity can be beautiful? And it could be him, you know, reminiscing after all he's been through, but for the most part, like, he doesn't look like he has any bruises. His clothes look kind of decent, like they're not ripped or anything. You know, his hands look fine. There's no blood or anything. And you know, and then following panel, I know we haven't gotten to it, where the flashback ends, he's smiling and it looks like a good memory. So maybe it was a good memory in the Phantom Scythe, but it just, to me, it makes more sense like it would have happened prior to the Phantom Scythe, which doesn't really make sense with the rest of the flashbacks to me,
Well,
because some of the flashbacks seem like they came before this.
I actually disagree. So if you go back to when you were saying humanity can be beautiful, he's smiling. So why is he smiling? He's likely thinking about one of those beautiful moments that he was describing, that brief touch of warmth. But when you scroll down and you see him kind of looking up at whoever he's talking to, this sense of humanity, I don't ever want to lose it. And his smile is gone at that point. So now what is he thinking about? He's thinking of the ways that he could lose his humanity, which to me, I kind of see like that, this expression in particular to me is very melancholic. Like, what has he seen at this point that he is trying to grip these memories even tighter? And I think the next panel, when we see him back in the present and he's smiling at one of his creations, or at least what he's drawing, I think that speaks a lot more that when he's thinking about these moments, it does bring him peace and this inner kind of peace. And that's why he's smiling, because he's remembering a better time and not dwelling on something darker.
Oh yeah, that's why I think it would have happened prior to the Phantom Scythe, but you know, with the rest of the flashbacks, it just doesn't really make as much sense. Because with Kieran, I think something that we're not taking into account right now is that Kieran is an artist, and you know, what do artists like to do? They like to capture emotion, they like to capture, you know, scenes and stuff. And so, you know, there's just too much ambiguity in this scene to really have any definite context about what's really going on with Kieran. We don't really know what's going on with his life. We don't really know what's going on with his, you know, emotional status or his family or whatever. You know, it's just Kieran's backstory is a very, very much a vague block of history. And there are a lot of moments where, you know, there could have been, you know, some idea, some semblance formed about what was going on with Kieran, but there just isn't, and it's something that I don't really like, because, you know, Kieran, yeah, he's saying these things because, you know, maybe he's in the Phantom Scythe, right? But he also grew up in a poor area, likely, as you were saying, that was you know, he was like hurt by the very people that were supposed to protect him, right? The police. So, you know, seeing that, and, you know, seeing how, you know, the government can turn on its own people, and seeing how, you know, just living in an area that can be so full of despair sometimes, you know, it's easy to really forget, like, you know, what you believe in humanity, right? And so when those subtle moments in life remind you, I think that's a very important quote, because he's talking on something small scale, because the big scale in this doesn't work. So yes, it could be Phantom Scythe, it could also just be his living conditions, it could be his family, right? It could be big things that affect his world. So he points out the subtle moments because those are what remind him of humanity.
That's a very good point, that it doesn't necessarily have to be Phantom Scythe. But also I think that the reason that Soph and Af are leaving his background a mystery, I think that it very strongly relates to the plot in some way, and it's going to be like a reveal or several reveals, and I think that's why they're keeping it so shadowed.
Yeah, I think it could be, I think like the mystery, like it could work, right? You know, keep it shadowed. I get that it's a mystery, but we're also 100 episodes into this, right? I need more than these contextless flashbacks, please.
I just to go off like what you were saying, Mindy, I completely agree. I think Soph and F are just like they're giving us the crumbs where they want, and the whole point was for this or at least Kieran's perspective in this episode is to say, no, reader, come back. Please like him again, because he was just awful the last episodes and we had no context. So I feel like this is their way to keep the mystery, but also give us a window into kind of Kieran's psyche and humanize him, honestly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like, okay, I know it's a mystery, right? And I know that there's purpose to this and to keep the suspense going, right? And, you know, he, again, I said this earlier, he is one of the biggest mysteries in this comic. However, you know, a good mystery can't have just suspense. It also needs clues, right? It needs puzzle pieces that you can put together, right? But, you know, with Kieran right now, we have many puzzle pieces, right? And we could make a timeline out of these puzzle pieces. But the thing is that the puzzle pieces are so vague that when you try to connect them together, right, you can't even tell if they fit.
Yep. Wait,
So
speaking of mystery, do we want to try to guess who he's talking to?
people were
Speculate on
saying,
that.
I remember like when Soph was streaming this, people were saying that it was Dylan. It could be Dylan. I have my doubts, but I'm not fully ruling it out.
What if it's Bella? I just thought about that.
Yeah,
You know, some
could be
people have the
Bella.
theory of maybe they were together in the circus and were friends when they were younger. So that could be. It's clearly someone he trusts very well.
I would gladly take that theory. I love anything with Kieran and Bella. Like,
I know.
okay. Like, to me, like Bella, I know like Will and Raphael, Kim and Dana, whatever. To me, the best sibling headcanons come from Kieran and Bella and the rest of the circus members. Like, they got a sibling dynamic. I don't know what to say. Like, there was like this one Instagram post a while back of like art with like, it was like a meme, sort of like a drawn meme. And it was like Bella and some of the rest of the circus members. Literally one of my favorite posts of all time. It was so funny to me. And I just love seeing like their interactions in a more like casual setting. And also I think like lately 72 has been creeping up on to be a more favorite episode of mine that I like more because of how like just Bella and Kieran interact.
It's funny. Does anyone else have any other theories on who he's talking to?
I was thinking it could also be the protectee. That's the name that or not really but like
Right.
the fandom, for like people who don't know, the protectee is the name that the fandom gave the unknown character that Bella alluded to in, I believe, 72. Because in that episode, Bella makes some statement about how
I haven't seen you being so protective of anyone since.
Yeah, and then like ... So she alludes to some character that Kieran was very protective of, and you know, maybe that character is this person talking to him here. And people have also speculated that Dylan is the protectee, which is a possibility, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking that it was Dylan as well. But you guys said that already.
So many mysteries. Would you want to take over now, or what she discovers in the attic?
Sure. Oh my God. Okay. I remember reading this and having my mind literally blown.
It is. It's very crucial.
Okay, so Kieran's scene pauses for a bit, right? Oh, sorry.
Just one little thing. Can we just say that Kieran is totally shipping
Oh yes. It's so cute.
Can we say that?
Yes, it's adorable.
It's so freaking cute. I just
Look.
wanted to highlight that. I'm sorry for interrupting.
I just gotta say, Lucas is the first Kiwi shipper. Kieran is the second. Okay.
He's the third. After.
Oh wait, Lauren's there too. I forgot about Lauren.
Lauren too.
It really is cute.
Probably
It's
okay.
adorable.
Lauren, Lucas, Kieran. Kieran. He has to know his place in this. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's super important. Yeah, you're right. It's, he notices things around him, right? Like, he's not stupid. Like, he saw right away. He was there for one freaking day, right? And he already noticed their dynamic and, and drew it.
oh,
Yeah.
I forgot about this. Okay, so I was just like thinking because I like to overthink, while we were recording this, and I'm looking at the drawing, right? And I'm looking at Kieran's expression. And yeah, maybe he's happy about like Kiwi, and maybe he's the third official Kiwi shipper.
What horrible thing are you gonna say now, Fwoot? What?
I was also thinking, maybe he knew some people who were like this in the past. Maybe biological siblings, maybe, him and Bella, maybe
Okay.
other circus members they grew up with,
I was waiting for the brutal death part, but I'm glad that didn't happen.
I mean, if it's his siblings, it probably means that they're either dead or he hasn't been able to see them in like 7 years. So that's the brutal part, Mindy.
Okay, fine. You did not disappoint, Fwoot.
Okay, so we're back to the attic, right? Lauren is surrounded by boxes. Some of them are open, some of them are closed, some of them are stacked on top of each other. And she's looking at this open box and she pulls out an old photo. And in the photo, we can see her parents, Mr. Rosenthal and Dylan. And she's standing next to Dylan. And there are other servants in their house as well. And you can kind of presume that this is like a photo of their household. Mm-hmm. So we got the family, the people who serve them, like butlers, maids, etc.
The one on the left is the driver, right?
Oh yeah, Abel's in there too.
Yep.
Kind of hard to tell because he isn't looking as ugly as usual because his face is kind of vague, but he's there. It's okay. I forgave him after I don't know many episodes, but at this point I'm still ready to tussle with him a bit. Still hated him at this point. But yeah, so everyone's there. They're all looking very happy, right? Dylan is looking absolutely adorable, and we see a tear fall on this because it's a time that Lauren can never get back. And she quickly after her tear fall, she quickly puts the photo down and starts looking through books. I guess they're books, I don't know what you call them, but like binders, I guess, of like their staff history. And she flips to Abel Sandman, and on that we see the name Abel Sandman, date of employment, April 16th, XX10, and he was the driver, and there's some writing that we can't really see. And Lauren thinks to herself, he died with them being her parents, in the accident. Did he drive their car off the cliff on purpose? And she puts the book down and starts looking through the other stuff in the box. And she finds a pamphlet, and it's very dusty. Some of the words have faded, and she thinks to herself, what's this? And the pamphlet, no, literally I flipped out when I saw this stuff. The pamphlet is dated May 4th, happy Star Wars Day, XX14, and it's titled People of Ardhalis, and it continues. For how long will decent men and women of Ardhalis accept to live in these indecent conditions? Some of it's cut off, so I'm making inferences. The Vester family is guilty of crimes. It continues.
They have tried.
It continues with a word that we cannot see, and it says, have tried to keep
on top it says they, if you in the bigger picture.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm looking at a smaller panel. Hold on.
Just scroll right on top. It just says
scroll
they.
down. Wait.
No, on top of it, right on top.
Oh, on top. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mindy. Okay. So the Avester family, which is the royal family, current royal family too. The Avester family is guilty of crimes they have tried to keep buried. And buried is very hard to see, but it is definitely there. So this is major. Okay. Like the royals, especially Dakin, a little shady before, you know, and Lisbeth.
Mhm.
We saw those shadows around Lisbeth in episode 41. No good things come from characters who stand in the shadows. Let me just say, unless it's a plot twist.
That's a great line.
And so here we have a mysterious pamphlet in a mysterious attic accusing the royal family of crimes that they've tried to keep buried, which honestly is like a lot of governments. So really, who is surprised? I should know better at this point.
Yeah.
And Lauren reads out the pamphlet, and we can't really see this text on the pamphlet itself. I cannot pronounce that. Anyways, she reads, a person's social status shouldn't determine the consideration they receive from their rulers. And let me read that again, because some stuff is like slightly bigger because they're trying to make a point. So, and I did not read it with that point. A person's social status shouldn't determine the consideration they receive from their rulers. And that's pretty loaded, just to say. Like, social status and rulers are the sort of bolded words. And, you know, you kind of think about that, like rulers, social status, and with the rest of that, it's kind of like, what do you think of? And because I have a little bit more context with all this, you know, reading ahead, you know, you kind of think of like socialism, you think of revolutions, you think of communism, right? These real life economic systems where, you know, socially people are trying to be more, to be more equitable or more equal, right? And rulers have been brought down, like less kings and queens and more like elected officials. Of course, this doesn't always work, but you know, people try, especially when there's a lot of big capitalist countries meddling in their elections. And Lauren continues, and she says, we are left trembling with indignation at these disgraceful injustices. And Lauren immediately thinks, wait, this is socialist propaganda from XX14. I've never heard of this before, but that's no wonder considering how overtly the royals are criticized here. And I think it's interesting to just notice, like, immediately, like, Lauren calls this, like, she's read, like, I don't know, 3 lines, and she's already like, this is socialist propaganda, which is also very loaded, you know?
It shows you the milieu that she's been raised with. It shows you like what
the value
form is in our Hollis now.
I think, you know, low-key, I think Rachel and Alexander would be trembling in their graves and shaking if they in their graves if they knew Tristan raised her like this. Because
well, given what happened, it's no wonder he raised her like this.
I mean,
right?
True. I'll get to that in a moment. Hold on. Because I look at this and I don't really think that you would call it like propaganda immediately, because it's really like, maybe I've just been indoctrinated into this.
No, I agree with you. It's regular basic human rights stuff, right? And at least in our society, it's like, duh, right? But the fact that she's like, oh, we want good, you know, treatment is like socialist propaganda.
Like it feels like a no-brainer statement. Like, a person's social status shouldn't determine the consideration they receive from the rulers, right? Like, you know, people in positions of power should be caring for all the people that they have influence over, right? They should be responsible with that power. They should be using that power to help the people, regardless if that person was born into wealth or not, because ultimately, like, you know, where you're born to, right, what family you're born to, what class they're in, is ultimately out of your control. And so it's not really fair when you are denied opportunities because of that, you know? And so, yeah, Lauren calls it socialist propaganda. Lauren, I know you're rich, but you got an education. Come on, use your brain. And I know that education probably had a lot of propaganda as well, but come on, Lauren. Critical thinking, common sense.
And I think I think this is a big theme in the story, is that Lauren was sheltered. If we're going to say deliberately to protect her, okay, right, that's another thing. But we know that later on when she goes with Kieran, like, or was it earlier or later when Kieran tells her she is in Great Chapel with Kieran?
Definitely later.
Right. So like, she's never been. She never thought about this stuff, right? She had her own issues to deal with, and she never thought about like the wider societal stuff going on in their country. So this is her awakening and like part of her growth arc.
Lauren is very privileged, right? Because she has not had to deal with the issues that this pamphlet is accusing the Avesters of, causing. We do know that her parents did have a lot of money. She even states it earlier in this episode, like where they killed because they were rich, right? And her uncle is the chief of police, so that probably makes a lot of money, right? And she works and lives in the 11th district, which from what we've seen is a pretty wealthy area because, Lady Grayson, who was murdered by Kieran, was able to afford a maid, right? Of course, Lady Arlingham, I don't know if that's her name, Ardingham, something along there, something along those lines. Lady A, I don't like her anyways. Lady A is able to have a butler, right? She herself, and Tristan have a really big house.
Butler volunteers for free for whatever.
Look, that butler is in a toxic relationship. He needs to run. There is too much emotional dependency in that relationship.
He doesn't want to run. He wants to stay with her for all of his life.
That's like she like
back home. So
she's like gaslight gatekeep girl bossing him, like there is some shady shit going on in there. But yeah, like Tristan and Lauren can, like, from what we've seen, they have a pretty nice house for the middle of a city, right? So they have money, right? Which, they've never really been affected by class issues because they've always had the privilege to live in comfort. They've always been able to live in comfort. They themselves work as police officers. Tristan and Lauren, they work as police officers, and police officers respond to the government, answer to the government, and especially as we'll see later in the season, police officers are people with positions of power, and that's also something that we can apply to in real life. And so I've never heard Lauren saying, I've never heard of this before. Yeah, no shit, girl. This stuff literally does not affect you. And you're lying about, I'll go down a little bit, and you say, but that's no wonder considering how overtly the royals are criticized in here. These weren't even legal under King Edward's rule. How did my parents get them? And that is also another very heavy line. There's a lot of plot being revealed in this scene. These pamphlets were not legal under King Edward's rule. King Edward was the king before Philip and Philip's father. And so, 10 years ago, what? Like, 10 years ago isn't that long ago. For me, it is, but for y'all, it probably is. And sorry, I'm trying to go somewhere with this, but there are too many thoughts in my head. These pamphlets are an expression of free speech, right? So what we're learning here is that even just criticizing the government, not liking how the government is run, especially since the monarchy, people don't get to choose their rulers. It's just like, oh crap, this government is really not good. Like, they don't allow free speech against them. It's a monarch, again, like they're not even elected officials, right? And apparently, according to these pamphlets, they're committing a lot of really shady stuff against their people, and they're neglecting a lot of the poor people. So that really brings in a lot of ideas about, classism and government corruption that we really just haven't seen in PH before. It has been like building up slowly, but now it's really starting to run. And Lauren continues to read, right to education, healthcare, security. We do not call for violence. We want a peaceful revolution. And she says that, like, very confused. We demand that our plea be heard and that the people of Ardhalis be treated like the decent men and women we all are. Signed, the Snapdragon. And they're calling for, again, very socialist things, and Lauren calls them like socialist. She follows it with propaganda, which isn't a mood or a vibe, but okay. Because these are, you know, I think we can all agree that these are things that everyone does deserve. You know, the right to get educated. Everyone should have the right to healthcare. Everyone should have the right to security. But to Lauren, this all sounds very outrageous, right? And that, again, what Mindy was saying earlier kind of just speaks to, you know, how she was raised. And something that's very different here is that the Phantom Scythe, right? We know that the Phantom Scythe is trying to also overthrow the government. So the Phantom Scythe is like a much more extreme version of Snapdragon. And the Phantom Scythe is doing this violently, right? Their goal and their aim is, or what they claim that their aim is to overthrow the monarchy and the class system that it sits upon. And so that is a revolution. It's a violent revolution, but it is a revolution. And here we see Snapdragon calling for a peaceful revolution. And that did spark a lot of speculation into, is this what the Phantom Scythe was before? Because the Phantom Scythe really announced themselves in XX17. However, this is dated XX14, so 3 years prior. That's like a 3-year gap where like anything could have happened, where they could have become much more extremist. Snapdragon, I mean.
Well, I mean, at this point, we already know what happened, right? Like,
yeah,
so.
We already know.
Yeah.
But look, I'm speaking from when this episode came out and what we were thinking.
Yeah.
And Lauren's reading this, and she says they're talking about the situation 15 years ago. It was a nightmare back then, and even now, it's barely any better in the poor districts. So Lauren is able to acknowledge that stuff isn't great in poor districts, right? But she just seems like, yeah, that's fine. That's normal. You know,
She probably doesn't think about it.
People don't deserve to learn, you know, people like, because they're born. And that's like, I don't think she even realizes it's a toxic mindset, because it's just normal to her. You know, her world, again, as we were saying earlier, her world is set. These are the truths of, you know, her world. And the thing is that her world is the bubble.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people, like, if they grow up not experiencing it, they don't think about it, because that's just how people are, right? We get caught up in our lives, and that's it.
You don't think about the issues that don't really affect you.
It also reminds me of just like other books, other novels where you have like quote unquote utopian societies. I'm not saying that this is a utopian society, or they're even trying to portray it like one, but the context, like, we as readers are led to believe that the world they live in is similar to ours. And I thought it was a really interesting the way that they kind of, it's exposition, but it's not like in your face exposition. It's, oh, by the way, this is how the society is run. And because we're learning everything through Lauren, we're looking at things through her lens as well. So not only are we seeing that, as Fwoot was mentioning that she is very privileged, we're also learning that the society itself is so far from what we were actually expecting, and it's just kind of subverting expectations completely. So I think the exposition that they're giving us was really well done, and through one of the characters' lens, so we learn a lot more about Lauren as well.
Yeah.
This is by far one of my favorite ways in this season on how exposition is given. Yeah. I'm not really a fan of like exposition when characters are like sort of talking, you know. So like Abel, he's cool, but I just don't like the way he gives information. But you know, here it's like it's not outright telling you, yeah, like, hey, the roles are bad, right? Or it's like you know, exactly like, yeah, Snapdragon is like the PS, you know, it's not like it's not super definite, but it's not extremely vague either, right? It's again, it's like the puzzle pieces, and the puzzle pieces start to fit together, especially when you start to take into account later episodes and previous episodes where there were small hints about this, and it comes together and it forms a bigger picture, and you're like, the world building is actually pretty good. Like, this is great world building in this episode.
The other thing too, I'll be honest, Mandy, you know this. I don't follow the Discord as much as I should. Has it already been discussed, like the meaning between Hyacinth and Snapdragon and even Phantom Scythe? Because as we were talking through, I was just kind of thinking about the fact that we have two flowers, and obviously Hyacinth has been discussed at depth. But then I was just looking up the definition for Snapdragon. Like, why would they call themselves Snapdragon?
Doesn't Snapdragon mean deception?
Uh,
That's what people were
says
saying.
grace and virtue.
Really?
Yeah,
I
and like
can't remember.
confidence and poise.
I know people have talked about the Snapdragon flower before, but I can't really remember what they
Yeah.
were talking. I think some people were saying it was like deception, which is why I said it. Snap.
Yeah,
Let me pull
so
up Google.
where I wanted to go with this was the fact that you have the monarchy, which, at least for this argument, I'm going to say that the monarchy, the Hyacinth represents the monarchy. And then you have these activists that want to change the current government, and instead of calling themselves anything else, they call themselves another flower of all things. So they're kind of saying, hey, let's evolve from the Hyacinth to maybe something else like a Snapdragon, where, you know, grace, virtue, poise, confidence, something that shows that they're very regal, but also they don't want to, they want to work within the system, not kind of uproot it completely. And then you have the Phantom Scythe, which literally means like, I am going to uproot you, like with the actual physical scythe. So I thought that was like a really fun imagery. Like, it's not just scythe, it's Phantom Scythe. Like, I'm going to uproot you and turn you into a ghost.
That's amazing.
I always saw like the Phantom Scythe as like, it's the ghost that's coming to it, right? Like the ghost will cut you down in an instant, right? You didn't even see it coming, which is kind of like their entrance at the Allendale train station. And I'm reading this article right now. What do snapdragons symbolize? Snapdragons have multiple meanings. They can represent strength, as they're able to grow in rocky, typically uninhabitable areas. And that kind of stuck out to me because, you know, Snapdragon is a socialist group trying to exist in a world that does not want it there. And the royals, as we'll see later, are willing to go many distances to, you know, stop them from existing. They can also symbolize themes like deviousness and grace. Snapdragons are sometimes used as a charm against falsehood. And so, yeah, Lauren continues and she says, did my parents support them? Were they a part of it? The Phantom Scythe were the first revolutionary group to be publicly known for defending such a goal. And that's the thing, and she says, but this dates from 3 years before. And that's the thing, though, is that what we know from that is that what Lauren had access to, the information that Lauren had access to, the PS was the only socialist / communist, whatever you want to call it, group that she knew, even though this group existed while the time that she was alive. And she wouldn't have been aware of these issues yet, but this means that some powerful group, likely the monarchy, has basically scrubbed the history books of any sign of peaceful socialist groups. And in doing that, they in turn villainize these ideas of wanting equal rights, wanting equal like healthcare, education, etc. They villainize those ideas because people do not associate those ideas with these peaceful groups. They associate it with a terrorist group. And it's not fully confirmed that that's the case here, but I like to think about that a lot. And to me, that's just, it's so villainous from like the side of the monarchy that I almost just kind of like, I don't respect what they're doing, but I'm like, nice play.
Well, the villain has to be a good villain, right?
Yeah. And so she looks inside the pamphlet and she finds a card. And she says, it's neither of my parents' handwriting. And it's a card for Orion. It's a business card. It says Orion and Sons, printers since XX75. And that's probably the previous century. And the address is 5400 103 Waterbury Avenue. And the card says let me read that in a second. Lauren says, it looks rushed. Was the writer in a hurry or running from something? And in red text, it says they are all dead. And dead is like all caps, very like, you could tell that like the writer was pushing the pen into the card as it's very messy and very like scratchy. And it continues, this is the point of no return, but it's not the end. And Lauren says, or thinks, who are they? Could this be linked to the Phantom Scythe? Wait, no. What if the Snapdragon were some kind of rival group, so the Phantom Scythe eradicated them? And if my parents were a part of it, she looks very, like, she puts a hand to her forehead and she thinks, what the hell does all this mean? Okay. First of all, like, because there's like I remember thinking like, because there's like no sign of like Snapdragon around the time that Phantom Scythe started, to me it doesn't really make sense that like they would coexist at the same time. And especially with the card, right? The card makes it seem like something happened and a lot of Snapdragon members poof disappeared, probably died, especially since it's red. Makes you think blood, this is the point of no return. So that sounds like a jump to extremism to me, right? Especially the way their dead is written, like it's very angry. You can sort of feel the emotion. This is the point of no return, but it's not the end. So like that means it's not the end.
It is not the end. Right. That's the beginning of something else.
Yeah. You can't go back to Snapdragon. So you have to go forward. And what is that? We know. And something, yeah. What was I gonna say? Orion and Sons printer, so which makes sense, right? Where did they print the pamphlets? Right. Yeah. Probably Orion and Sons. Something else that's interesting to me is that Orion is the second time we've gotten like a nod to Greek myths in this comic. First it was the Circus Royale and the names of all the characters, but now we have Orion and Sons, and we still don't have any answer for that. Oh my god.
Right.
What if Redcliffe, like his code name is Orion? Like I thought it would be like Zeus or like Kronos or something, but what if it's Orion? And what if he was the one who owned the press, right? And he helped
actually reading the story of
because
Orion.
Because his name was like Orion or something, like like the circus, right? It's all like the printer. I don't know if this is making any sense. Basically, Redcliffe called himself like Orion, or maybe his first name is Orion Redcliffe. And then because he basically like took the circus kids, like, or Circus Royale people under his wing, they all got like Greek names, right? From mythology. So it's like, owns the printer, helped Snapdragon with the printer, right? Because by that point, he would also have the money for a printing press.
Why would he help them? I mean, if he was interested in people's welfare, our vision of Radcliffe so far is like a negative one. I remember, I know in the beginning I said, oh, we don't know, maybe he did it out of benevolence. But at this point, he seems like a very nasty person.
It definitely wasn't out of benevolence. I hate Radcliffe with a burning passion, but
so why would he be like helping the socialist group?
That's like a question that I don't know if I can answer, because we have a lot of suspects for apostles, right? And a lot of them do not seem like they would be very happy with what the Phantom Scythe is trying to do. So it's really, a question like, what are they trying to gain? And for me, I think that, Redcliffe, I don't know, actually.
Maybe we could put this
that's something we'll have to figure out another time. We don't have enough time for this. But yeah, so very ominous message. It's in red. Does it mean a lie? Because we know the red symbolism.
Yeah.
Probably not in this case. I don't think I remember people talking about it, but in this case, I think it's more just like to imply like violence.
Yeah.
And then the whole like, what if Snapdragon were some kind of rival group, so that the Phantom Scythe eradicated them, and my parents were part of Snapdragon. I always saw that as trying to throw us off the scent, because to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that the Phantom Scythe would want to take out a peaceful version of their group that's trying to basically do the same thing that they're doing, just less extreme. Because like in doing so, you basically turn a lot of people off from your cause, right? The PS wants to completely destroy the class system, basically, right? So why would they want to destroy Snapdragon, who essentially has the same goals as them, right? In this fight against the Royals, they need like everyone, right? And so if they killed off Snapdragon, Snapdragon is the only way they would be able to really connect with people, like on a larger scale, because like, you know, violence ain't gonna cut it for everyone. More people want to be like, they want to see a reason behind this. They won't completely jump over because, you know, PS is a terrorist group. They're gonna want like Snapdragon there. So Snapdragon could be like, I don't know, they're like public communications thing.
I don't think she's thinking about it too much. I think it's just like a really quick thought, and I also think that she doesn't view the Phantom Scythe as being benevolent, so she wouldn't.
But
she doesn't.
Like that was, I think the authors were trying to throw us off.
Yeah, but we do have to finish in a few minutes, so
yeah. I'm sorry, Mandy. One last thing. Why does Tristan have this stuff in his attic? Like, does he know about this? Because this is technically his attic.
Yeah.
Good
Did
point.
he go through
Yeah.
this? Like, was Tristan Snapdragon? Is he PS?
But we
Did he
still
just
don't know any of
because like he's also
Right.
the chief of police. Homie's working for the government, but also a government position where, you know, you could sneak out a lot of information. So it's kind of like,
Yeah, we don't know anything. He's also,
yeah, but he also wasn't police chief at that point.
time.
Like, yeah, he would have been police chief post Allendale.
I mean, this is just like a crack theory I'll run in like 10 seconds. Maybe it's the monarchy that's running the PS because they need good public opinions. And the best way to do that is to have an enemy that
Common
everyone
enemy.
commonly hate.
Yes, that's my theory, and because I think that Elizabeth is behind it, and yeah, I mean, I think that it makes sense that the Phantom Scythe did come out of the Snapdragon, right? And that the Phantom Scythe legitimately are were radicalized, but I do think that Elizabeth somehow turned it to her advantage and uses them and feeds them behind the scenes so that they can distract from the real problems, so she doesn't have to fix the real problems.
And it gives you motive for why they kill off the original Snapdragon members.
I have a lot of opinions on that theory, mainly negative ones, but I don't know if right now is the best time to get into it.
Let's try to just finish up the last.
We'll finish up and then we can talk about it.
All right, so then we transition back to Kieran. We see him turning the lamp off and kind of thud, thud, thud walking out. And then we see this broader view of all of his artwork, or at least that he has posted around his window. I would assume that this is artwork that he's more attached to, since it's more, it's easier to visualize. And then we start scrolling down into the panel, and we see the little kids that he had given some, I'm forgetting if it's bread or money now. It was money, right? Yeah. And just him capturing that moment. And then a really lovely portrait of Lauren as well. So kind of teasing like, yeah, he's this prickly cactus, but he likes Lauren, and we like him too, despite his many flaws. And then even more telling, we zoom in on this picture where he has his sword up to Lauren's throat, and we start hearing his inner monologue. On that night, I could have killed you, but I hesitated. Why did I freeze? And he actually wrote the part onto the paper itself. I don't know why.
And I didn't know why.
But I hesitated, and I didn't know why. But for the first time in years, it made me feel human again. For the first time since ... end scene, we have like the most poorly placed chair dump, edge, side, whatever, ever place. Damn you. You know what you did.
I have a death to chairs sticker that I got off the shop. I haven't used it yet, but I will find a good place to put it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, and then we have like all the paper on top of the boxes. Just call back to the beginning of our podcast.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So I loved getting this window into Kieran. I think it was very, very telling. And yeah, loved it.
mhm.
Oh, also most poorly placed shine as well.
Right. So I think this, I mean, we always, I know, I think it's your theory where, that he was planned to have this, encounter with, what's it called? With Lorian at the beginning, and, the whole thing was a setup. So the fact that he froze though, that is works against that theory, because it means that it was unplanned. He didn't know, and something made him freeze. And
Look, Mindy, that theory was made in February. This episode released in like August 2020. Theory,
Fine.
February 2021. This episode was already out. That theory was not meant to go places. Okay.
Okay, fine.
It's not the Dr. Seuss book. Other places you'll go. No, it's literally half crack, half serious.
Mhm.
More as a joke.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, this is like a huge, like a big question, because, people like, did he know her as a kid? Was it something extraordinary about her eyes? Like, and I believe in the Canvas version, he didn't have the scene at the cafe before he met her, right?
No.
No.
Right. So it's not, we can assume it's not because he was like, oh, that's the girl from the cafe.
Yeah.
So we don't know. We just don't know why he froze.
True.
So I know some people speculated maybe Dylan described Laura to him.
I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
like that would have been a very human moment that he witnessed, just like two friends being very playful with each other, kind of setting up this sitcom-y type scene. And maybe he wasn't expecting, something that he would draw later on to be under his sword so suddenly. So maybe it was intentional for them to include that scene, to give Kieran more of a reason to pause, to see, Lauren in that humanistic light, like force Kieran into that mindset, just like, we kind of flip it completely and Kieran's been forced into like a monster mindset instead. It's just, this is kind of turned on its head.
It could be, except that, in the Canvas version, he presumably did the same thing without having met her. So I think it's more of a plot reason that we just don't know yet.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think, I don't know. I feel like I still want to make that, like, this is me just playing devil's advocate. Even if it wasn't in the original Canvas episodes, I would still make the argument that he saw some humanity, like saw her and thought, or just something sparked the humanity inside him. And just adding that scene in the beginning just gives it more weight. Now there probably is a connection, likely through Dylan, if not someone else, like maybe her parents. I have no idea. But there likely is another, like, in between, something that connects them. We just don't know exactly what that is yet.
Whenever this question comes up, like, oh, why did Kieran hesitate? After like this episode came out, I tried to be in a few of those conversations. Ultimately, I just dip whenever this conversation comes up, because I do not have the patience for Kieran's ambiguity, and Kieran not even knowing himself. I'm like, dude, come on. Like, for season 1, sure, let's speculate about it. Like, why did he stop? It's all the things that you guys are listing. Like, maybe like he knew Dylan, maybe they knew each other in a past life. But then we get this episode, He doesn't even know himself.
Right. Which he could have
Damn,
either
Kieran.
happened really long ago, and he kind of has like muscle memory, but he doesn't actively remember it. Or like he might have had brain damage with all the beatings that he had, and some memories of his were erased.
For this, like, the only way I can see this question really going, and the reason I don't really like speculating on it, is because it's either going to be like some really simple answers, just like, oh, like her face just made me feel human, right? It's going to be, and it's going to be revealed at like probably the very end of this series, where Lauren's like, hey Kieran, like I know we just got married, but why did you hesitate and not kill me that night? And I'm like, and Kieran's like, oh yeah, I thought your eyes were really pretty and it reminded me of someone. I'm like, okay. Or it's gonna, or like the answer is gonna be like so like complex or deep, and it's just gonna have so many layers that you can't even like see it coming from where we are at this point. Or it's just gonna be some random ass answer that like, just doesn't even make any sense. But it's like, okay, there you go. That, or there's just gonna be no answer. Kieran's just gonna be like, I don't know, man. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Mindy, sorry in advance. I just want to make like one edit to your ending. We're actually going to find out like why when Kieran is dying in Lauren's arms.
Great. Thanks. You're worse than Fwoot.
I love the priorities here. Like Kieran's literally like, bleeding out, right? Guts are all over the place. And he's like,
she's like, tell me.
Yeah, Lauren's like, Kieran, I know I could call for like medical assistance right now, but I need you to tell me like who or why did you not kill me that night? Because you die, or me knowing the answer to that rather than you dying. I know after all we've been through, that is my priority.
You're telling it wrong. It's more like Kieran trying to make Lauren feel better, and he's like, oh yeah, you remember that night I almost killed you? Well, I didn't, because you got those pensive eyes.
Literally, no, he would flip out. Like, how would that calm Lauren being told her eyes are pensive? No, because literally, if it's like, oh yeah, it's because Dylan told me about it, and then he dies. If I were Lauren, I would be pissed. Like, I would be like, you're telling me this now? Like, he was my childhood best friend before yours. Okay, get in line.
Well,
okay, so 1 minute or less. What's on the picture that's blocked by the chair?
Probably Kieran's mom.
I think it's Dylan. I think it's, or at least someone else.
Why would he have a framed photo of Dylan though? That's what I always gotta ask.
Oh,
like,
that's true.
People always say like, oh yeah, it's Dylan. And I'm like, why would he have a framed photo of Dylan? Like, Dylan was the son of a household gardener.
Yeah.
Like, Mr. Rosenthal was not famous or anything, and neither was Dylan. So it's kind of like, why would Dylan, like, framed in gold too?
Well, it's going to, I think it's going to be someone that connects Kieran to Lauren, which is why we're not seeing it right now. I don't know if Lauren. I think it's someone that connects them though.
What if it's baby Lauren and like I said, his memory was knocked out due to extensive beatings?
Well, that is not necessarily medically accurate.
I remember seeing a theory that the person in the portrait was Rachel Sinclair, because Rachel was an apostle, so maybe she met Kieran at some point. And that's why he hesitates, because he recognizes Rachel's eyes in hers, because if you look at some of the flashback scenes, you'll see that Lauren and Rachel have the same eye color. Maybe he just saw, so maybe he saw Rachel in Lauren. But that's kind of weird if you start like dating the person that reminds you of your like kind of adoptive mom figure. Kieran, that's pretty weird. Don't do that. Anyways, I know we have to end soon, so I just want final thoughts. I do not agree with the monarchy created the phantom side theory, and we can't get into it now. And if we could, I would really be on a rant for like 10 minutes, which is why I'm holding myself back.
Okay, we'll do it on a different episode. I promise.
We'll do it, yeah. Maybe on like, it'll probably come up again. So
it will for sure come up again.
It's either that, or you'll find several paragraphs in the YouTube comment section after you upload this.
Okay.
Nice.
Fine. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was fantastic doing this episode with you. I'm glad we finally got around to doing it. So
thanks for
big episode. Thank you for having us, Mindy.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you so much to my current patrons:
Susie, Lady Libris, Lily, Jenny, Haley, Maria, Molly, Veronica, Emily, Joe, Rochelle, Saucy Tuggles, Meg, Ann Rose, Priya, Alexa, Misty, Laura, Joanne, Patty, Jen, Emilda, Esther, I'm Watching You, Taurus, Poppy Seed, Marie, Jen, Emily, Jean, Jen, Erin, D, Kate, Lily, Beckett, and Duranda. Your support is truly appreciated.